Hey everyone, this is Charlie and you're watching The Burrow. Good Morning Midnight, Lily Brooks-Dalton's science fiction tale, is in many ways a classic post-apocalyptic story. Augie and Sully, our main characters, are left to figure out what their next steps are, what their future holds, when they can't be entirely sure that they'll have any say in the matter. We're first introduced to the character of Augustine, or Augie as he's known throughout the book, who is this aging or aged astrophysicist who is sort of left alone, completely alone in the world, when any contact he has with the rest of humanity is cut off, and he's sort of left at this Arctic research center where he's been sort of researching the planets and trying to make his own way. The really interesting thing about his predicament is that he chose to be in that position. Augustine is the type of person who believes that he has a greater role to play in the future of humanity and in the understanding we have of God and Earth and our place in the solar system. And because of that, he's chosen to forego any kind of personal relationships, be they relationships with potential or actual lovers, friends, family members, and things like that. Also, as I said, he can sort of propel his career and make himself somebody worth remembering. On the other end of the solar system, NASA astronaut Sully and her crew have just completed the sort of first ever deep space mission to Jupiter, where they traveled there by spacecraft and sort of surveyed the planet, the first humans in history to do so, and they're sort of hopefully on their way back to Earth. Now what's interesting about Sully is that she too has sort of lost any sort of human connections to people, even to some extent the people in her crew. And it's for a lot of the same reasons as the Augie character. She sort of has lost a relationship, she's lost a husband, she's lost a daughter, sort of as a byproduct of wanting to be something more, wanting to explore, wanting to be an astronaut, not necessarily as a means to achieving that goal, as was the case with Augie. What's really interesting about the way Brooks-Dalton approached these two characters is that they sort of end up in the same exact places as they started the book by the end. The characters start Augie and Sully as these sort of mirrors of each other. One of the characters looks at this bleak, certain future, knowing that sooner than later the end is coming for them, while the other looks ahead sort of hopefully, while being unsure what exactly is going to happen. And what's interesting about the way the story unfolds is that by the end their outlooks have completely changed, but they still remain these mirror images of each other. Now how Augie and Sully fit together is in hindsight rather predictable, but the way Brooks-Dalton writes the story with not giving things away too quickly or sort of avoiding some of the more tropish elements of this kind of work, it keeps it from feeling too cliche. For this and many other reasons, you can't help but come to care for Augie and Sully, despite the fact that you're going to see them at their worst, and it's going to make you wonder why you would ever feel invested in a character that is so terrible or is so uncaring about the people around him or her. But ultimately, like I said, it's just unavoidable. With post-apocalyptic fiction, typically there's one of two avenues that the writer will take, right? Either they will take a sort of macro approach, what happens to the world after the end of the world, the end of humanity, right? And then on the other hand, what happens to people on like an individual scale? And it's interesting because Lily Brooks-Dalton does give us some impression of what happens to the Earth, or in some ways to the solar system, or the things that we've created after sort of, for whatever reason, be it plague, be it failure of technology, that part's left really rather purposely vague. What sort of is left after humanity has sort of fallen in one way or another. Good Morning Midnight isn't overly concerned about this macro problem though, and like so much of my favorite post-apocalyptic fiction, whether you're talking about The Walking Dead, S.M. Stirling's Dies the Fire, etc., is that it focuses very, very tightly on what happens to people, what happens to Augie, what happens to Sully when sort of the world falls out around them. And if in the macro version of this question, you know, what's left, what have we done now that there's nothing left, were our decisions worth it as a race? Those same questions are asked of Augie and of Sully. Was Sully's sort of blind ambition, were the choices he made to mean something and to leave a legacy behind, does it mean anything now that there might not be anybody left? And the same can be said of Sully. Was it worth sort of leaving the planet and giving up any relationship she had in hopes of pushing humanity forward, sort of expanding out from the Earth, now that there might not be an Earth to go back to? And so it's this really, really interesting look at these two characters. And as I said, it's really, really hard not to care about them. Beyond that, I think it's really difficult not to ask these questions of yourself, or about the sort of real world state of humanity and what it might mean if suddenly in our lifetimes humanity does collapse or the world does end, whatever that ends up meaning. And I think what I really like about Good Morning Midnight is that it doesn't attempt to answer those questions for you. It poses those questions, and to some extent will answer them for our characters to sort of give us some sense of resolution as readers. But you can't help but walk away from this going, well, is my decision to make this video, for example, will it mean anything after I'm gone, or after, if the world ends tomorrow, if zombies come out, or there's a plague or something like that, will it have meant anything? And because it doesn't answer those questions for you, and Brooks-Dalton assumes that you have the intelligence and the care to want to think about these things for yourself, you walk away feeling like you've had like a really important experience for reading the book. And yeah, it turns out to be a really, really good experience. Not a perfect experience. There were some things I didn't like all that much, but nothing that would keep me from, say, wanting to read the book over again. So I give Good Morning Midnight 4 stars out of 5. Of course, if you guys have read this book, I'd love to hear what you thought about it down in the comments below. As always, thanks always for watching The Burrow, guys. Please check out all the other videos we have here. And if you want to hear more from me, be sure to follow me on Twitter, or you can be my friend on Goodreads. So thanks, guys, always for watching. Go write something awesome. And it's to that end that I picked up Lisa C's book called China Dolls. I'm going to do my best to keep this review spoiler-free for the sake of anybody who is a fan of Lisa C and hasn't read this book yet. But maybe something will pop out accidentally, so I apologize for that in advance. Now, the narrative